In my last video I shared this game, Tetris City, which I made with the VGDev Club at Georgia Tech. I led the game's development over the course of the fall semester from the initial pitch to the final polish before the demo, and with the help of 9 other teammates, we managed to make a pretty good game. I won't go over the details here, you can watch the other video if you're interested, but in short, Tetris City is a side-on city builder where you place buildings using Tetris mechanics. Your goal is to build up this city on a floating island and buy the nuclear reactor to keep it afloat. We recently wrapped up our final demo and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, so feel free to check the game out. But one important lesson I learned while making Tetris City is that when you're working with a team, your goal isn't just to make a great game. You're also trying to make the development process as accommodating and efficient as possible. And over the past semester, I've picked up a couple ways to do just that. So whether you're making a game with your school, like me, or you're just working with a couple of friends, here are the lessons I learned about working with a team. When working with a team, planning is extra important because it helps your teammates stay on the same page and gives them confidence in the direction of the game. Making games can be a huge commitment, and nobody wants to work on a game with unclear direction. To that end, your first step when planning should be to make your time frame clear, whether you've got a tight deadline or you're just taking it week by week. When planning the game itself, consider that you're basically pitching the game not only to your potential players, but also to your teammates. It's your job to make your ideas sound feasible to work on, and prototypes help massively with this. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you'll recall my 3-step planning prototyping method, and it works great with a team too. The first step is to make a list of your core features, things you only have to create once, like player movement or the game's logo. The next step is to make another list of your axes of expansion, elements you could add or remove depending on your scope. These are things like levels or player skins, where once you have a few, it's up to you how many more to add. The final step is to plan your schedule, deciding how many of each of these elements you aim to implement. This is where prototyping comes in. If you add 1 or 2 of each of these axes of expansion to your prototype, you can come up with an estimate for how long it takes to implement each one. For example, it might take you a week to add a new level and 2 days to add a new skin. However, this is also where introducing more teammates adds a wrinkle. Different teammates work at different speeds, so you'll have to be flexible in either your scope or your deadlines. For example, it might take you a week to add a new level, but it might take someone else 2 weeks or 2 days. This is where it's important to leave some buffer room in your plan and be willing to adjust your scope gradually. But game dev isn't all head-down work. It's important to take time throughout development to coordinate with your teammates, assess the progress you've made, and possibly change directions. In VGDev, we have 4 milestone meetings each semester, approximately a month apart, where team leads present the progress since the last milestone. On top of the demos mentioned earlier, these are a great opportunity to finish up tasks and take a bird's eye view of development, something we can easily forget to do if we aren't conscious about it. Larger software companies do this with sprints as part of agile development, holding meetings every 1 or 2 weeks to discuss completed and planned work. Whatever duration you choose for your milestones or sprints, they can be a good planning tool as you naturally divide work into manageable chunks. Finally, this should probably go without saying, but understand your teammates' level of commitment. With something like VGDev, where no one's making any money and the stakes are low, you shouldn't expect everyone to be fully committed to the project, especially because people might be working on more than one game, on top of homework and other extracurriculars. This is where flexibility is important. If you have more artists than expected, focus on those axes of expansion that deal with art, or if you have a dearth of programmers, maybe scale back the axes that require coding. However, if you have a more close-knit team with a monetary investment involved, you can hopefully rely on your teammates being more consistent with their work. This phase in particular will vary based on the exact structure and size of the team. If you're on a smaller, close-knit team, perhaps without a real leader, then what works best will depend on the team dynamic. I'll admit that I don't have very much experience here, but you can't go wrong with a focus on good communication and effective compromise. That is, getting to the root of a disagreement rather than trying to resolve everything right down the middle. For a larger team with a more hierarchical structure, like a VGDev team, my biggest advice is to go with the flow. It can seem intimidating to lead a group of people, but part of your job is to follow their lead. For example, at the start of Tetris City's development, I spent some time creating a big document to hold sketches, design ideas, story beats, and anything else the game might need. For my game designers, it was great. They had one place to dump ideas for buildings, natural disasters, etc. But I quickly found that the artists on the team preferred to send me sketches and designs via Discord DM. So instead of making a fuss about it, I decided to go with the flow and accommodate this system. Of course, it's important to set examples. I was the first one to share my designs in the development document, which probably made the other designers more comfortable comfortable to do the same. As for team organization, I like the model that VGDev games use, where each game has sub-teams for programming, art, music, etc. These sub-teams aren't mutually exclusive, so team members can join as many sub-teams as they want. This is especially important for a smaller game like Tetris City, where team members might need to help out in all sorts of aspects. In most VGDev games, the team leads have a weekly meeting for each sub-team where they go over assigned tasks and assign new ones. As I discussed in the last video, instead of sub-team meetings every single week, I decided to set aside every other week for a combined meeting with all 5 sub-teams to go over larger goals. I think this helped keep us focused on the direction of the project as a whole, rather than everybody working in their little game dev cave. One thing we were warned about as VGDev team leads is that certain team members will always be intimidated by you, at least at the start of the semester. Of course, people with lots of experience in the club who know you personally or have led games themselves will understand that you're just trying your best, but there are others, maybe freshmen or just people new to the club, who might see you as an imposing figure, so it's extra important to make an effort to be approachable and human. Make sure your teammates know that you're available for questions or clarifications and that you're there to help. It's also important to make task assignment a two-way street. Let people choose their own tasks, but make the expectations for each one clear. And if you get all that right, you'll be ready for... Sharing your game can mean a lot of different things. In VGDev, your 15 minutes of fame are the 2 demos each semester, one in the middle and one at the end. There's also a showcase at the beginning of the following semester to drum up interest for the club. After those demos, we upload a build of the game to the club's website. Most VGDev games are made in Unity, which takes a while to create a build, especially a web build. However, Godot only takes about 20 seconds to build a game the size of Tetris City, which gave me an idea. I made a public itch.io page for the game that I kept updated with a recent build. That made it easier to show off the game at meetings, and it made demos a snap. Going a step further, I even created a script to open a headless instance of Godot, build the game for Windows and web, and upload the game to itch.io. I put the script in a batch file on my desktop, so it only takes one click to publish the latest version of the game. If you're using Godot, I suggest you try and make a system like this. You can make a manual script like me, or use something like GitHub Actions to upload a new version whenever new code is pushed. Even if it's infeasible to do something like this, try to make your build process smooth and transparent, so that, ideally, anybody on your team can make a build at any time. Of course, for this to matter, it's also important to keep your game in a fully playable state as much as possible. If somebody's testing out the 3rd level, you don't want to have a game-breaking bug in level 2, or if you do, at least add a debug menu to skip it. But your game's real time to shine is during demos, when you get to observe other people playing your game and hopefully get some hype going. So how do you make your demo the best it can be? Well, the bulk of this work usually concerns the game itself. It's a constant cycle of playtesting and tweaking, ideally with some fresh faces when possible. With VGDev especially, where most people will only play your demo, it's important to make your game easy to learn and full of spectacle. These principles inform some of the design decisions in Tetris City. For example, I initially wanted to add building upgrades, but after the mid-semester demo, I realized that the game needed more spectacle towards the end. So I talked to the team and we decided to add natural disasters instead, which are more exciting and easier to understand. It was a hard decision, but it was informed by playtesting and I think it was the right one. Try to keep the player from having to learn too much at once, especially once they've just sat down in a crowded room with 5 more games to play and one eye on the dwindling pizza boxes. Once you hit play in Tetris City, after the first cutscene, all you see is an empty city and a button pointing upwards. Clicking that brings you to Skyview, where you can see 2 buildings for sale. Buying City Hall unlocks the End Day button, which lets you progress through the rest of the game. In the end though, if worse comes to worst, it's not a cardinal sin to have to explain some things to the player directly during a demo. For Tetris City, we didn't finish the opening cutscene in time for the final demo, so a few people needed an explanation of the basic premise of the game, although most people already had a vague idea. But after that, they were able to play the game without much help. Since the process of game development is just as important as the product, documenting and sharing this process can be helpful and fun, as you've seen with these last 2 videos. But fun as it might be to share your team's progress, it's important to be respectful to the other members of the team, and it's a careful balance to preserve their privacy while celebrating their achievements, especially for something like VGDev, where it's difficult to get everyone's informed permission. So this video, as well as my last one, have been pre-screened by my team and VGDev leadership to make sure no one has any objections. It can be fun to share your game with others, and it's always satisfying to look back at all the progress you and your teammates have made. At the end of the day, you've not only made a great game, but become stronger game developers yourselves. Every team is different, and I hope at least some of this video applies to you no matter your situation. A lot of advice for solo game development can be translated for working with a team, and there's plenty of that out there, including on this channel. If your school has a game dev program and you're not yet a part of it, I encourage you to try it out, even if you're not interested in leading a project. As for me, I'm very proud of what my teammates and I have accomplished with Tetris City, and I'll encourage you one more time to give it a try. Now that the semester's over though, my upload schedule should start looking a bit more normal. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love to start making money from this channel. My next game dev priority is to finally finish Breezy's post-launch updates. In the past I mentioned adding multiplayer, but I've decided to shelve that until further notice. The first update containing the 2 new courses is very close to completion, and I want to get it out the door so I can finally close the book on Breezy. After that, who knows? If any of this sounds interesting, or if you just want to discuss game dev in general, make sure to join my Discord server. Have a good day.